On September 11th, a lot of us think about where we were on that day. And I was thinking about this last night, that so many people that work in our newsroom don't have a direct connection to 9/11 because they weren't even born yet. Mm-hmm. And Paige has a very direct connection. Yes. You were 4 on that day, and you're from Long Island.
Yes, if you probably hear it in the accent. But 4 years old, I feel like I don't remember a lot from when I was 4, but 9/11 specifically just hasn't slipped my mind. I think my brother feels the same way. I'm already shaking.
Yeah, well, you were at the bus stop on 9/11 in the morning with your brother, 4 years old. Your dad was there. Mm-hmm. And a neighbor came up and said, "Oh my gosh, something's happening."
Yeah, so my dad is in the FDNY. He's retired now, but we were getting neighbors on the bus. It's just something we used to do because we weren't even in kindergarten yet. So we were down at the bus stop. It was at the bottom of a hill, and I remember our neighbor driving down the hill and just yelling, "Chris, Chris, something's going on," and he ran to the car. And then he just ran right up the hill and drove away and went obviously into the city where a lot of people were running from. He was running to with his brothers in uniform. So it was a moment I'll never forget. And then the rest of the day was kind of a blur. I didn't really understand what was going on. I just remember my mom had, some emotions, but was strong for my brother and I. And my dad was busy for weeks.
Okay, so did he check in that day? Did he come home that night? What happened as your dad was, now that in years of going over this, what was happening that day for your dad?
Yeah, so he went right into Citi Field where the Mets play, and that's where they kept all the first responders. They pretty much just waited there, that's how my dad describes it, for a little while until it was safe to go and start cleaning up the mess, which he describes obviously as something he'll never forget, and one of the moments in his career that shaped him into who he is today. But a lot of times, we think of a dad as a dad, but every day he was putting himself on the line that we're so proud of. But just that day specifically, they were at Citi Field, him and all the other FDNY firefighters for weeks and weeks, and we have some photos to show of that as well.
Yeah, what was he doing that day of 9/11?
When it first happened, he was just home. He was off that day, thankfully, because who knows if, he was working that day. But so he drove in. We were about an hour and a half from his fire station, and then they just took him into Citi Field. They waited until they got the A-OK to go in and start going through the debris and cleaning up
As you know it, was he there at Ground Zero the day of, or did they have to wait, till the next day to be able to go sift through the rubble?
I'm not sure if it was the next day or that day, but I can check obviously before this later on. So.
Yeah. So, does he ever talk about it? What does he talk to you and your brother and your mom about?
Well, we're definitely a very emotional family, and I think it's one of the moments in his career that he looks back on and feels very proud of. And there aren't a lot of those moments. Obviously, he was a firefighter for 26 years in the FDNY, so we are so proud of him. But he just reflects it was a normal day on the job, and he was just a firefighter. But what stood out to me so much, and I think this is why at 4 years old, why I remembered it, was that he didn't even think for a second, I'm going to wait here until I get called in.
Yeah.
He ran up that hill and drove away. And just drove, like I said, where everyone was running from, he was running too. So I'll never forget that moment. And I think it's more real, 9/11 every year as it comes, because as I'm getting older, I'm now watching the memorial service play out and listening to those people read the names of the thousands of lives lost. And they show all the FDNY firefighters there at the stations today, which is a fond memory I have with my dad growing up. But, Luke, my brother, and I just feel so lucky that he was able to come home after weeks of cleanup, and we were able to continue our relationship with him, and a lot of people weren't that lucky. So my family, just coming from first responders, my uncle was in the NYPD that day. He was a detective. When the tower fell, he was there. So I still think he has some lung issues, so he's handling that now. But again, we had 2 connections right there in New York, and I'm so lucky to have grown up with them and to have had my dad be able to watch the news every day and live these moments and be proud of me, because we're so proud of him.
Did he have a tradition on 9/11? Is there something that he always did to commemorate that day?
Mm-hmm. Well, all the firefighters, whether they were active duty or retired, on 9/11, they always go back to Station 158 in Queens, New York, the Swamp Dogs. And so every year, even growing up, we have some photos of my brother and I. We would go, and a lot of the other young kids would go with their dads And he'd squeeze into his dress blues, which he's still fitting in these days, and they would just go and honor, you know, all the firefighters who lost their lives, but they'd have just memorial ceremony. We'd have some breakfast, but every day it was something. I even called him yesterday. I said, "Are you going into the city tomorrow?" And unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, but traditionally, that's his go-to. Every 9/11, they go in, past or present firefighters, and they just are together because that's what it's about, honoring, you know, their brothers.
And he made his family a part of that then too, that every year commemoration.
Oh yeah, all the kids would go. I still remember a lot of them. We'd just be playing that day as our dads were reflecting on what they went through and what their friends and you know, colleagues went through. But yeah, it was a big family day. We would go to the station each and every year, and they do it every year. They're doing it today as well. So yeah.
So I mean, Paige wears her heart on her sleeve and will tell you anything. But you know, we saw this posted on Facebook today. It's not something that you run around and tell everyone about, especially on this day, because I think it's probably hard to share those memories because it brings back so much emotion. But I think it's really a special connection that you have with 9/11 that you're able to share with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, like I said, a day that I think many of us will never forget. Everyone is going to remember. If they were, I mean, a lot of people are younger than I was, but just being 4, I remember, and I think everyone remembers where they were when they got the news that this was going down, whether they were in school or early release, as some of my friends talk about. But for us, my brother and I, we remember standing at that bus stop and seeing my dad do things we would never imagine. I just talked to my mom this morning about it, and she said she was so touched that day because all the neighbors came, knocked on our door. She said the ice cream man even came to check in to make sure my dad was okay, which at that time we didn't know. My mom didn't know, and she was just being strong for us because there was so much uncertainty. But we were one of the lucky ones, and unfortunately not everyone was graced with that honor of, you know, growing up with a dad. So I don't take that for granted. He had 26 years in the FDNY, so.
And he's super special too. We love King Chris.
Yes, he is so special to so many of us. And he gets up every morning and watches Good Morning Virginia. Danner and I are like the most emotional people, but so I just feel very blessed. And I think on days like today, it puts into perspective of how important, you know, just cherishing each and every moment with everyone who's important to you, because you never know what could happen, you know, in this day and age. So
important lesson. Never forget that.
Yes, definitely. Never forget it. That's a good logo for the day. Yeah. So yes.
Appreciate you sharing that story, Paige.
Of course. We love you.
Thanks for watching the ABC 13 YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos and live coverage and local stories, click to subscribe and download our ABC 13 News app.